Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into web design in 2025?
Always ready to talk shop, especially about what's coming next.
I figured you'd be into this. We're looking at this article, Tendance Web Design 2025, on esthétisme et efficacité.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one making the rounds. Lots of good points in there.
It really gets into how aesthetics and functionality are blending, the rise of immersive tech, and the whole push for accessible and eco-conscious design.
It's a lot to unpack, but super relevant for anyone working online these days.
Exactly. So to help us make sense of it all, we've got, well, an expert, someone who lives and breathes this stuff.
Happy to be here. It is a fascinating time for web design, no doubt. I mean, think about it. The internet is this massive thing, billions of websites all vying for attention.
It's mind-boggling, and most people are experiencing it all on their phones, too.
Exactly. Mobile browsing is king. And that's really pushed the bar for design. Faster speeds, better screens. It's all led to more sophisticated graphics.
Oh, for sure. But it's not just about the visuals anymore, right?
Right. User experience is everything. People are used to how smooth and engaging apps are, all the little animations, transitions. Websites need to deliver that same level of polish.
Makes sense. Got to keep up with those slick apps.
You know it. So brands are trying to stand out in this super crowded space, but they also need to keep up with all these evolving design standards. It's a balancing act for sure.
It's a lot. And then this article mentions minimalism plus habité, this inhabited minimalism. What exactly does that look like in practice?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like minimalism is evolving. We're moving past those stark white spaces, rigid fonts. Think warmer colors, subtle gradients, even strategic pops of bold color.
So not just stripping everything back to the bare minimum then.
Not exactly. It's more about that sweet spot between simplicity and visual interest.
I like that. So how are designers achieving that balance?
One big way is with micro interactions, tiny animations when you hover over a button, little movements that guide your eye. They add sophistication without overwhelming the user.
It's those little details that make a website feel alive and interactive. So are there any specific technical things designers need to know for these micro interactions?
Well, CSS and JavaScript are key, of course, and there are frameworks like Framer and libraries like GSAP that make it easier.
Good to know. But with all these animations and effects, we can't forget performance, can we?
Absolutely not, especially on mobile. If a site's bogged down with heavy scripts and huge images, nobody's going to stick around. You got to find that balance between beauty and speed.
A tightrope walk, for sure. Now, the article also mentions brutalism and neo-skeuomorphism, which are a bit different from minimalism. Let's dive into those.
Sure, brutalism is definitely a statement. It's all about disruption, bold fonts, stark blocks, saturated colors, even uncropped images. Meant to be jarring, provoke a reaction.
Sounds like it could be cool, but also risky. Does it work for every brand?
That's the thing. It might be perfect for a startup trying to stand out or an artist with a bold website, but if it's done poorly, it can be confusing for users and potentially hurt accessibility.
Got it. So strategic choices needed there. What about neo-skeuomorphism? That one feels a bit like a throwback, right?
It is, in a way. Remember skeuomorphism, those designs mimicking real-world stuff? Like letter textures or realistic shadows? Well, after flat design took over, now we're seeing skeuomorphism come back, but in a more modern way.
I'm kind of curious to see this comeback. What does neo-skeuomorphism look like?
Think rounded corners, soft shadows, and those frosted glass effects, glassmorphism. It adds a touch of elegance, a polished look.
That actually sounds pretty cool. Any downsides to it?
Performance can be an issue if things get too complex, and there might be compatibility problems with older browsers.
Yeah.
But done well, it can add a lot of depth and personality to a website.
Always looking for that sweet spot. Speaking of depth, what about 3D? It feels like it's come a long way from those clunky old 3D graphics.
It has. Technology has caught up. We've got more powerful devices and faster internet. Now designers can incorporate 3D elements that are lightweight and fast loading, adding depth without sacrificing performance.
I can picture it, rotating logos, interactive product models, parallax scrolling.
Exactly. Those 3D product models are killer for e-commerce, letting customers really visualize things. And parallax scrolling is a great way to make a site more immersive.
Sounds amazing. But are there things to watch out for when adding 3D?
Always. You got to be responsible with it. There are optimization techniques like texture compression, minimizing WebGL use. Got to avoid those performance bottlenecks.
So strategy is key. Make those 3D elements enhance the experience, not hurt it. Now let's shift gears a bit. We can't forget about accessibility, right?
So important. It's not just about being ethically responsible, it's often a legal requirement. The WTIG guidelines are a great framework for making websites usable for everyone, including people with disabilities.
Give us some examples. What does accessibility look like in web design?
Sure. Good contrast between text and background so everyone can read easily, clear labels on interactive elements, keyboard navigation support, and providing alternative text for images and videos so people using screen readers can understand the content.
And beyond the ethical and legal reasons, there are business benefits too, right?
Absolutely. Making a website accessible opens it up to a wider audience, strengthens your brand, and can even be a marketing advantage. Everyone wins.
It's about creating a truly inclusive digital world. Now, as websites evolve with all these trends, what about navigation and information architecture? How are those changing?
Well, minimalist menus are huge right now. Clean and simple is what people want. And for sites with lots of content, mega menus are becoming more popular. Those big, multi-level ones that let you organize tons of information.
What about those single-scroll websites? They seem popular, especially on mobile.
They are. But you have to be careful with those layouts. Make sure there are clear visual cues separating the sections so people don't get lost while scrolling.
It's all about guiding the user, creating a seamless flow of information. Any new tech on the horizon impacting navigation.
AI-powered navigation is pretty cool. Systems that analyze how people are using the website and then personalize the navigation based on their behavior in real time.
That's amazing. Head navigation is getting really smart. Now, before we wrap up this first part, let's talk about the impact web design has on performance and the environment.
Right. That's where frugal design comes in. Streamlining your code, optimizing images and videos, basically making the site fast and efficient while minimizing its impact on the environment.
So it's good for users and the planet. What are some things brands can do to embrace frugal design?
Lots of options. Using SVGs for graphics whenever possible, choosing a green hosting provider, optimizing your code for efficiency.
Those are great tips. And I think there's a real opportunity for brands to promote their commitment to sustainable web practices. Consumers care about that stuff.
Totally agree. There's a growing awareness of tech's environmental impact, and people want to support brands that are doing their part.
Awesome. So let's pause here for a moment. We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
Yeah, we've seen how web design is evolving. It's not just about aesthetics anymore. It's about creating engaging, accessible, sustainable experiences.
It's about thinking big picture and creating a website that reflects your brand's values and connects with your audience on multiple levels.
Exactly. And we're just getting started.
Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll explore even more cutting-edge trends pushing the boundaries of web design.
We'll be venturing into VR and AR, talking about conversational interfaces and what it all means for the future of digital marketing. You won't want to miss it. Welcome back, ready to explore some more of these web design trends.
I'm all ears, especially about this whole VR and AR thing. It still feels a bit futuristic to me.
I know what you mean. But it's becoming more and more relevant for web design. WebXR standards are making it possible to create some truly mind-blowing, immersive experiences right on websites.
So what kind of experiences are we talking about?
Think virtual showrooms where you can check out products in 360 degrees, or interactive 3D models that people can, spin around and zoom in on.
Whoa, that's cool. It's like bringing the product right to the user.
Exactly. But designing for these immersive experiences has its own challenges, of course.
Oh, I bet. Like what?
Well, seamless integration is key. You got to make it super clear to the user how to navigate and interact with these VR and AR features. The transitions need to feel natural. You don't want to create any disconnect.
That makes sense. It all has to feel intuitive.
Right. And speaking of intuitive interfaces, what about those conversational interfaces we're seeing pop up everywhere?
Oh yeah, the chatbots. They're everywhere these days.
They are. And as AI and natural language processing get better and better, chatbots have the potential to completely transform how people navigate websites.
You mean instead of clicking through menus, people could just ask a chatbot for what they need?
Exactly. It could streamline things big time. But again, good design is crucial here.
I can imagine. A bad chatbot experience would be pretty annoying.
Totally. A chatbot that's clunky, slow, or just doesn't understand what you're asking can actually hurt the user experience and make a brand seem kind of out of touch.
Makes sense. You got to put the effort into designing and implementing them well.
Absolutely. So thinking about all these trends we've been discussing, it seems like web design is becoming less about static pages and more about creating these dynamic, interactive experiences.
It's like we're moving away from just providing information and towards building a relationship with the user.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Technology is evolving, user expectations are changing, and there's this growing awareness of accessibility and sustainability. It's all pushing web design in a new direction.
So it's not just about looking pretty anymore. It's about creating something that's both visually appealing and functional, accessible and responsible.
You got it. And who knows what other exciting trends are just around the corner. The world of web design is constantly evolving. It's an exciting time to be a part of it.
I'm ready for the next wave. Let's move on to the final part of our deep dive and try to make sense of all this for brands and marketers who are navigating this ever-changing landscape. All right, final part of our deep dive. We've covered so much ground from minimalism to 3D and everything in between. What a whirlwind.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. So many cool trends emerging, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in web design.
So as we wrap up, let's try to distill some key takeaways for our listeners, especially those who are, responsible for their brand's online presence. What should they be focusing on in this new landscape?
Well, I think the biggest thing is user experience has to be front and center. You got to design websites that are intuitive, engaging, accessible to everyone. We talked about clear navigation, well-structured content, smooth transitions.
Like building a welcoming, easy-to-navigate world.
Exactly. And visual appeal is still important, but it has to work hand in hand with performance and accessibility. If a site's slow, people are going to bounce.
Nobody's got time for that, especially on mobile.
Right. And remember, accessibility isn't just the right thing to do, it's also good for business. Makes your site reach a wider audience, strengthens your brand.
It's about making the digital world inclusive for everyone. Now, we also talked about VR and AR starting to make their way into web design. What's your advice for brands considering those technologies?
I'd say approach it strategically. Think about how VR and AR can actually enhance the user experience. Tell your brand story in a more compelling way. Maybe it's a virtual showroom or an interactive 3D experience that brings your product to life.
It's about finding that sweet spot between innovation and, actual practicality.
Yeah. And don't forget about storytelling. Whether it's VR, AR, or just great text and visuals, you need a narrative that resonates with your audience.
Because stories are what connect with us on a deeper level.
Totally. And one more thing. Web design is constantly evolving. What's trendy today might be outdated tomorrow.
It's a fast-paced world.
It is. So stay curious, keep learning, experiment with new things. That's the key to staying ahead of the curve.
Be a lifelong learner.
You got it. And don't be afraid to take risks. Push the boundaries a bit. Web design is a field that rewards creativity and innovation.
It's that blend of art and technology that makes it so interesting.
Exactly. And the future of web design, well, it's not something that just happens to us. It's something we're all actively shaping.
So true. And on that note, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder. How would you contribute to the evolution of web design? What kind of online experiences will you create? The possibilities are endless.
That's a great question. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the future of web design.
It's been a pleasure exploring all this with you. Until next time, everyone, keep innovating, keep creating, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible online.